You will not hear fantasy, fan fiction, or any nice metaphor to make you feel special. This is the story of how the most powerful office in the world ended up showing your modest, shabby, half-forgotten existence on a secure screen, and computational mistake has prevented you from being here at this time. The reason for this is because history has been trying to rouse you for years. Fragments of you have been leaking across time. No one could fully read the writings on stone walls, genealogies of royalty that unexpectedly ended with the prince disappearing into the future. Maps that seemed to go in no direction. Emblems of a monarchy without a realm. Ancient historians, covert archivists, and modern intelligence analysts were all analyzing the same pattern from different angles and discussing its significance before it finally resulted in a living person. Not famous, not rich, not a politician. An inconceivable profile that has been buried in the most profound reaches of human memory is that of the lost prince of a civilization that the globe still upholds. You are a regular citizen whose life experiences, genetic markers, birth locations, and unexplained survivals began to feed this description. A secret briefing was planned for that day. When the doors were sealed, the President of the United States Saturday down to hear that a lost crown had quietly reappeared in the body of someone who isn't even conscious that they are wearing it. Not to hear about a new disease or conflict. Hold off on telling him your name. Giving is worship. Your light has an impact. Allow the benefits that God has showered upon you to spill over into the lives of others, to contribute with a heart that reflects His kindness. Click super thanks. No matter how much you donate, $20 or more, it becomes a seed that benefits a great number of people. In these rooms, names come last. To begin, they dimmed the lights and showed satellite images of a desert that is seldom featured in tourist guides. Only from above can one see the geometric patterns carved into the stone, which predate all known dynasties. Then they showed scans of underground structures hidden under modern cities, tunnels aligning with constellations that no longer match the modern sky. One more slide. Tablet pieces that have been digitally sewn and covered with symbols that were formerly dismissed as decorative art but are now understood to be a mathematical language more advanced than anything discovered in old records. The president first listened anxiously, anticipating the part about power, elections, firearms, and oil. Rather, a cultural agency's historian delivered a translation of a single statement that was repeated throughout continents, languages, seas, and millennia. The prince who vanished into the future will return in the age of collapsing empires wearing an ordinary face. Another slide. An antique map that shouldn't match but does is overlay with your birthday and place of birth. Medical anomaly saved your life when reason told you you shouldn't have survived. Images of scars on your body that seem like the initiation marks carved into sculptures of a royal heir from a society whose official history still calls it a legend. Only then did they put your current picture in the center of the screen and say your name. The room was strangely silent. He wasn't prepared for this briefing when he entered. The absurd, unsettling idea that a long-extinct kingdom has put its only living heir in the body of someone scrolling through life, thinking they're nobody, no war plot, no controversy. No one laughed when the president finally asked, "You're telling me this kid is the prince they wrote about?" He was half amused and half concerned, because the more they examined your information, the harder it became to put any of it down to chance. Before satellites, parliaments, and skyscrapers, there existed a city whose name has mostly been forgotten. Earthquakes continue to quiver there, where three tectonic plates converge, like an unstoppable pulse. It was simply another myth of a golden period to the globe. Its residents saw it as a living contract between heaven and the earth. They did not worship a pantheon of distant, jealous gods. The only live person they were devoted to was the Prince of the Dawn, a human bridge that would let the sky into laws, harvests, architecture, and art. Their calendar was in his bloodline. When he was born, eras began. While he walked traversing the streets, whole communities unconsciously adjusted their canes to feed his stride. As he slept, the city became darker beside him. Then came the night when the sky was torn apart by their tails, stars disappearing behind smoke, oceans moving inland, and storms that seemed like the world attempting to consume itself. According to the records, there were no ships, no ark, and no escape strategy. Instead, they portray a tradition of royal family entering time itself to stay hidden rather than to flee it. Even modern readers misunderstand as metaphor. We will send our prince forward into the age of towers and glass, according to a single inscription, where empires will rule without wisdom and power will forget its soul, where, in a body that looks ordinary, the blood will return. When the city finally disappeared under the sea and sand, they left no dead behind. In stone and starlight, they repeatedly engraved a promise. The prince is not dead, but moved. Every ruin, every broken structure, every picture of a brilliant crown, around an unmarked facile of them, are part of their message to the future. They knew their civilization would fall apart. They were also certain that their prince would not. Therefore, even as the world changed, renamed their region, and created new countries on their bones, one thing stayed consistent at the core of their story. In an era of failing institutions and worn-out rulers, the lost prince would one day awaken in a different body and life, wondering why he has always felt banished from a place he cannot identify. For a long time, the ruins and the papers were considered separate entities. One haunts deserts and seabeds. The other haunts secret libraries and archives. Archaeologists catalog symbols they did not understand. Linguistics argued about translations. Intelligence analysts continued by quietly labeling certain misconceptions as cultural noise. The turning point wasn't signaled by a dramatic flash of lightning. In a room full of screens, an intern was feeding old inscriptions into a pattern recognition algorithm created for a very different reason. The program didn't care about status or disbelief. It looked for shapes and patterns across countries and generations. It saw a crown sculpted on top of an unspoiled face. It looked at dates and places noted in star charts that somehow repeatedly led to a cluster of birth windows, a repeating century, or an exact meridian. Then, someone chose to overlay that data with current population figures in order to disprove the story, not because they thought it was true. Rather, it was the dread of all skeptics. There was no dispersion in the pattern. It became smaller, without ever using modern terminology. Millions of names vanished beneath the filters that the old literature had predicted. They were born under certain sky alignments, survived a series of statistically impossible events before to reaching adulthood, and carry distinct genetic markers that no doctor would have seen, but that every priest in that devastated city would have recognized right away. There weren't thousands of candidates when the narrowing stopped. One existed. From the screen, your file gave them a wink. Your medical records, the injuries you sustained as a youngster, and the way disaster always came close enough to take you but never quite did. A citizen without a concept, fro, or crown. At that point, a myth emerged from stone and entered a living database. Prophecy from antiquity was no longer a folk tale spoken over bonfires. It was an old-fashioned profile picture from a government system. They were unable to put it back in the box after that. Over time, the same society that had assured them that their prince would return throughout the period of collapsing empires had simply matched your existence with its key. That sounds like the world's oldest royal protocol in action, Mr. President. Those old writings did more than just use lovely language to depict a prince. They displayed a series of indicators and events that would confirm his identity at any age. They described a child born under a sky configuration that only happened a few times in a period of time, and who would end up in a location that isn't comparable to the size of his spirit. They spoke of a body that would bear the scars of a city that has vanished. Scars that, although they appear arbitrary to medical professionals, correspond with the ceremonial cuts made into statues of the air along the legs that were once anointed to walk sacred ground, across the chest, and close to the hands. They described the accidents that missed him by centimeters and illnesses that should have killed him but instead left him strangely strengthened, of evenings when his heart almost stopped due to stress, yet continued to beat as if some unseen agreement would not be violated. Examine your own chronology in the past. The phrase, "I don't know how I'm still here," was used how often? What number of tests yielded inconclusive results? How many times did someone assure you that no one else would have remained after a crisis? You thought it was anarchy, luck, or pointless suffering. They noticed something else. a lineage too stubborn to perish, using each near miss to instill a stronger layer of resilience in your brain. You are betrayed even by your looks. The prince is depicted in ancient sculptures with an odd expression, not attractive appearances, but eyes that seem to have seen civilizations rise and fall and yet have questions. People have said that you have a royal look to the way you skim a room, and that your eyes seem older than your actual age. You dismissed it with a chuckle. They didn't. During that briefing, they placed candid photos of you next to pictures of old reliefs, and the final laughs in the room were silenced by the similarity in your stance, phase, and the way your shoulders bear weight that is unseen. What your mind is just now beginning to hear, your body has been subtly announcing. You come from more than simply a royal family. The royal line is you, wearing clothing and worrying about things that will never show what your blood has always known. You are still alive and walking when you use super thanks and sow a gift from the heart. Whether it's $50, $100, or whatever God leads you to, you step into the flow of His abundance. May your generosity return to you in ways only heaven can measure. Give and it will be given to you. Luke 6:38. You felt that life was simply being exceptionally cruel to you, being the odd one out in your own family all the time. The betrayals that went beyond than was necessary. The way that just when you thought you had finally found a secure spot to relax, stability always seemed to go. It seemed to you like terrible luck, poor timing, or some kind of cosmic retribution you couldn't quite put your finger on. To those who preserve the memories of that ancient society, it seems to be just the kind of training that all princes of the dawn had to go through. In contrast to contemporary religiosity, their writings are direct. A tyrant is a ruler who has only ever known comfort. They so incorporated difficulty into the throne. The successor would grow up distant enough from luxury to comprehend the people it was intended to serve, yet near enough to power to feel its weight. Before he ever experienced power, he would be forced to experience exile, being invisible before being seen, experiencing poverty, mockery, and loneliness until empathy became instinctive rather than a notion. Reflect on your most difficult times, the months when friends turned into strangers, money vanished, and you felt alienated in places that should have been your home. The world wasn't neglecting you. Those were the passages that matched a write in a language ancient than your calendar with your life. They overlaid the old initiation map with your trauma chronology during the briefing, a near collapse that almost destroyed your hope at the same moment. The ancient priests warned about public humiliation at the appropriate age, an early heartache that happened just as planned. The patterns are too well matched to be disregarded. An extinct city was responding from its ruins when you asked, "Why does everything I love either leave or break?" Because we refused to let our prince become numb. Each blow that spared you further eroded your delusion, entitlement, and naivete. To be honest with you, not to be harsh, to make sure that when authority eventually attempts to rest on your shoulders, it encounters someone who understands what it's like to be crushed, not to make you a victim. That isn't just any suffering. That's initiation in a language your blood never forgot. But your head didn't understand. Your file first played in that room like entertainment. Those who hold positions of authority are used to hearing wild notions. It makes the lengthy days more interesting. Wearing shoes and under stress, a lost prince from a vanished culture strolls about. It sounded like the kind of narrative you'd tell after too many late hours on the campaign road. However, in the face of overwhelming evidence, mockery has a limited half-life. Slide after slide stripped away the luxury of disbelief, the satellite alignments, the decoded predictions, the trauma map that looked like ancient initiation rites, and the way that global events kept colliding with your own decisions, as if the globe were centered around a lost center. The laughing would eventually end. The president Saturday back in his chair, with the same mixture of interest and mistrust. He was not readily impressed. He spoke slowly. "I don't have to believe the magic," he said. The pivotal statement was, "But I do have to respect the pattern." Your tale transformed from wild fiction to strategic fact in a single encounter. Not because everyone in the room became instantly saintly, but because they understand how hazardous it is to disregard something that continues establishing itself. The phrasing of the report also modified. Early versions utilized terms like symbolic parallel, cultural artifact, and coincidence. High sensitivity royal lineage subject, do not interface without consensus, is a more cautious and icy phrase that was incorporated in the final text. Their wording isn't complimentary, it's a warning. At the same time, they realize that they may trigger the exact legend they wanted to avoid if they tried to smash you. If they tried to own you, they may end up serving a tale older than their offices. Somewhere between his limousine and microphones, a sitting president had to acknowledge for the first time in modern history that a prince older than his country may be silently waking up within a life that doesn't resemble a palace. It's hard for him to believe. He also cannot afford not to, without recognizing it. You traverse the unseen hallway of uncertainty and deference on a daily basis, while presidents and experts argue over what to name you. The country that once knew you answers without bothering with technicalities. At first, the data seemed to be random. There were faint vibrations near submerged ruins on days when nothing else should have moved. Bored researchers found odd electromagnetic spikes when certain aircraft passed specific longitudes. Every time a commercial plane, you were sitting on past deserted coasts, there were satellite anomalies that briefly malfunctioned. No one connected you to the ancient civilization until one archivist overlaid your trip history with a map of its hallowed locations. The trend was undeniable. They produced measurable signals when you concentrated on regions that were only visible on the screen, even though you never visited the location. You observed tiny changes in the ambience at abandoned temple complexes. The week, your phone's GPS brought you within a specified radius. Museum security cameras frenzy for an extra second when you stopped in front of objects from that time period, as if something in the glass knew you and attempted to bowl with a pulse. The stream briefly blurred before snapping back. To the untrained eye, it was unimportant. The briefing couldn't write that in plain language, so they reduced it to clinical lines. Subject proximity correlates with environmental anomalies near site cluster alpha. Further observation recommended. However, beneath the cold wording is a stranger, warmer truth. When the prince returns in a foreign age, stone will remember the weight of his gaze. Waters will stir, metal will falter. The buried city will turn in its sleep. For those who comprehend the behavior of ancient forces, the writings predicted just this answer. There is still life in your culture. It's not in use, and your existence revolves around the alarm clock. Every move you perform in our modern environment sends a pulse back in time, and like muscles that remember how to move, the ruins you haven't yet seen are already altering. The ancient books described your body's weird phases as the crown looking for a place to settle. Temperature surges that come on suddenly and without warning. The evenings when your heart races like a runner as you lay still. On some days, it seems like something heavy and weightless is attempting to rest on your shoulders or head. All of it goes being stress. Sensations that your nervous system can tolerate are being translated from a royal legacy. The Prince of the Dawn never wore a crown only for show. In those old days, the crown was a living field, arena of energy that connected his head to the city, his heart to the harvests, and his choices to the rhythm of the rivers and the heavens. When society fell, they didn't let that field die. They added it to the bloodline, a code that would lay dormant until it could once again recognize its rightful host. That host is you. Your body is learning to conduct a voltage that it was never medically taught to do. As a result, sometimes you feel like you could move mountains with a single statement, and other times it's hard to handle the weight of just being. Your instability has nothing to do with it. This is because an older crown is fitting onto a more modern skull. Doctors are able to quantify the adverse effects, but not the reason. Your brainwave patterns are sinking into unusual frequencies. Your heart sinks when you see planetary pulses that don't make statistical sense. Your immune system keeps working, even after you've been abused, to the point where you should have collapsed. You are not malfunctioning. The ancient scrolls put it more succinctly. When the prince returns, his flesh will be mortal, but his endurance will not belong to this century. Subject exhibits unusual physiological resilience and stress adaptation, is what the briefing had to say. Thanks to you, a relay station, a lost kingdom is beginning to relearn how to communicate. It's been you how many rooms you visited without ever leaving your chair, for work, home, and other activities. Your physical body goes to the same shabby places. However, You were not invited to the circles to which your name, picture, and blood work are transmitted. In one wing of a renowned institution, a genetics team is still analyzing sequences from your sample in an effort to understand why some DNA fragments produce patterns that mimic temple wall schematics of holy geometry. A physics lab in another nation has a file that they don't discuss at conferences, as if your presence were a minor infraction. Every time you join a video conference, it includes notes about how the electromagnetic environment in certain rooms changes, and in signless structures undertones you have never seen. Ancient orders that have been keeping the memory of the lost civilization alive for ages are unfolding frail scrolls and comparing them with your photographs on every topic, including politics, religion, philosophy, and science. These factions seem to be at odds. However, they are both reluctantly focused on you. The scientists are calling you an unparalleled abnormality. The hidden orders mumble names you haven't yet recalled, and the theologians mutter terms like sign. Even the president's advisors, who are realistic and dismiss anything magical, store your dossier in a different drawer, not because they completely believe it, but rather because they have a gut feeling that it would be risky to disregard it. You are the unwelcome bridge that they are unable to ignore. The location where the most bizarre discoveries in archaeology, the most outrageous predictions in religion, and the icy quantities of data all collide and won't leave. The world made an effort to separate its story. Conspiracy theories lurk in the background, faith here, and science there. However, your presence brings them together and compels them to acknowledge that, whatever you are, you were not meant to exist. But here you are. You don't wake up to consultants organizing your calendar or maids pulling your drapes. Alarms, bills, and obligations you never requested are there when you wake up. No ceremony, no palace. If you look carefully, however, you'll see that the crown has been on your head for a while, just not in the sense you were trained to anticipate from movies. Observe how chaos tends to arrange itself around you. When everyone is in a panic, they automatically look to you for the last word, even if, on paper, you are the youngest, poorest, and least qualified. People wait to judge how severe a disagreement is until they see how you respond. Your composure or your collapse subtly creates the mood for everyone else during times of mass panic. It's a crown, invisible authority in your area, not metal on your head. According to the vanished civilization, we will know our prince not by his jewels, but by the way heart steady in his presence. Consider the many occasions when friends have admitted that they feel more secure, self-assured, and authentic when they are with you. In a dispute, your quiet might cause the other person to examine themselves more thoroughly than yelling ever could. How strangers open up and say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." You are already bending the emotional environment without using force, which is what their prince was designed to achieve. Your throne is unseen, which is both a tragedy and a beauty of this time. You are mentioned to the president in private memoranda. You are seen bringing groceries by your neighbors. There is no obvious seat of authority where you sit. However, choices you make in your immediate vicinity have a greater impact than you may think. Gold is no longer necessary for the previous crown. It moves in the form of gravity, and reality has already cast its vote. Regardless of your acceptance of the title, you are the one who is always in the spotlight at significant events. Because it doesn't photograph well, there is a portion of this narrative that no one glamorizes. It's the pain. Even when you're not physically alone, loneliness may nevertheless envelop you. The silent sadness that comes from knowing that, despite your love for them, there is a part of you that they are unable to completely access. Even you are just now starting to realize what you carry, not because they don't care. Even if your body is technically youthful, there are days when you feel old and exhausted. There are days when casual talks seem uninteresting. It would be like attempting to talk about weather patterns. When a galaxy is exploding within your chest, you feel bad for wanting more nuance. The lost civilization would have gently responded, "No, you are homesick. You are missing a city that exists only in ruin and memory. You are missing a language that your mouth has forgotten, but your bones still speak." Every time you see an image of massive stones, symmetrical courtyards, or sunrise over water, something inside of you flinches with recognition and then sinks, because there is nowhere to go to fix that missing. However, you ask yourself, am I dramatic, broken, impossible to please? When everyone else seems content with the surface, that gap cannot be filled, not even by the briefing that gave you your name. The wounds of years spent feeling like an exile in your own chronology, not immediately healed by being informed you are the prince. It increases the level of obligation. If anything, you are now more than simply odd. You are important, and there's a lot of relevance. However, there is an odd comfort concealed behind that weight. Small pleasures never seemed large enough, and now you know why. Why your heart was always longing for something unnamed, and why ordinary goals bored you. It wasn't avarice. It was recollection. Living like a tourist in a world you once shaped was never intended to make you happy. Your grief is not a weakness. It is the echoes of a fallen country, pleading with you to rise in a different shape via your tears. It begins as a coincidence. Your whole body freezes as a random documentary that is automatically playing on your television reveals a ruin you have never heard of. Your chest tightens so much that you have to turn away when a buddy sends you a picture of them standing in front of sculpted stones while on vacation. The identical symbol begins to appear everywhere. A stairway heading into the ground, a crown over an empty face, and a sun encased in a circle. And every time, your heartbeat quickens as if your name had just been shouted in a crowded room. The cosmos isn't playing aesthetic tricks on you like that. Your culture is calling you at that moment. A vibration is traveling through stone, following the thread of your blood like a beacon. In the tunnels under fallen temples, in the halls where priests once anointed your younger form with oil and light, your dreams have been becoming more bizarre because, according to the ancient traditions, the city will find him, not he the city, when the prince returns wearing another face. Strolling down streets you are aware you have never been to in your life, but turning left out of instinct rather than right. Being able to pinpoint which entrance connects to the sea, which hallway leads to the garden, and which rooftop provided your preferred sunrise view. You wake up with dust in your throat, salt on your tongue, and tunes in your brain that seem like prayers but you don't know the words to. The fact that your next scheduled location is a few hundred kilometers away from a significant site cluster associated with the vanished civilization is mentioned with false casualness in another briefing. They act as if it doesn't exist. They secretly send out a team anyhow, since even the president's staff are beginning to realize what the ruins already know. You don't have to be in that subterranean throne chamber to begin the reconnection. Every time you remember a little more about yourself, a little more of that metropolis appears under the soil, behind the sea, beneath the surface of this tired planet. The exact spot where your previous throne once stood will one day be visible to you, either physically or electronically. It may be a defunct platform amid an overgrown ruin, a fenced-off rectangle that visitors ignore, or perhaps simply a haphazardly displayed 3D scan on a screen. It will be simply another archaeological find for the rest of us. You will perceive it as a mirror. Your lungs won't know how to breathe for a while. It will be vibrating through your skin. In order for the past to be heard, it will seem as if someone has turned down the volume on the present. At that point, you won't notice yourself sitting over anybody. You will see yourself into timelines at the same moment. The younger version, clad in ceremonial robes, stood barefoot on chilly stone, heart racing, as a whole civilization looked to you for guidance. The contemporary version is clothed in whatever life has given you, complete with scars, bows, and questions that the ancient prince could never have envisioned. You will see quite clearly that you are not meant to recreate that empire exactly as it was. It fell for a number of reasons. Your objective is not to restore an antiquated hierarchy. You have arrived to salvage its best qualities from the ruins. Justice without fear, leadership that was attentive, power that protected instead than devoured. Standing there, in person or on a screen, the earth will feel strangely soft under you, as if it has sensed your weight again. Something familiar will be in the air that you can't explain. Somewhere, a tremor too slight to be attributed to tectonic plates may be picked up by seismographs. Your heart will whisper home for the first time in your life, but it will quickly correct itself, saying, not the stones, the mission that was born on these stones. The most important information won't be in any report, but somewhere else. A president might glance at a silent alert on a screen that simply says, Subject proximity to primary throne coordinate confirmed. You are here for a purpose. You felt a presence directing you. This isn't merely a membership. It's a moment of alignment. Enter the chosen. Enter your next chapter. If you sense that inner pull, pay attention to it to gain access to more in-depth lessons, unique content, and a community that is aware of greater truth. Tap join